I'm going to talk about architecture, and I'm going to talk about architecture and legacy applications. And as Jacob just explained, I don't mean anything bad about legacy applications. This is code in production that I didn't write, really. So we have a short agenda. I'm going to talk a lot about business, and I work in a bank, and of course. So we have, no, I wanted to, I'm sorry. So, yeah, this is it again. So first I want to talk a little bit about myself, really, apparently. So I drew all the slides myself, and I can see that there's a slight issue with the radio, with the PDF there, but that all works. So that's me. I'm an independent consultant. My wife, she's a coach, and she said that, wow, you drew yourself in a power position. And I really didn't. This is the only way I can draw persons. so I just challenged myself. I saw this fun app, and I tried to do a drawing. And I'm on Twitter at LLData, where you can find me. And I work at the BC. That's no secret. I just as an external consultant, I'm not allowed to speak for BC. I speak for myself, but that's my experiences working at BC on a project. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to talk about mortgage. And how many in here has a mortgage? Yeah, that's interesting. So in Denmark, a mortgage is just the loan that you have in your house for the bottom 80% of what it's valued for. And so like a typical example would be you have borrowed 1 million kroner at the 4% interest rate. And so there goes a lot of processes into changing those mortgages into other loans. And basically this is what this project is all about. And I could say a lot about this, but I want to avoid this happening. It's late in the afternoon, and you all heard a lot of presentations, so I try to keep it entertaining, and I hope you stay awake. At least there's 2 guys here awake, and these are the guys from the Boli team at home. And then there's one guy here running around with his hair on fire, and that's because actually I drew that yesterday, because today is a production day, so we're putting stuff into production, and I was hoping that everybody was going to be here, but actually there's a couple guys missing because they're running around with their head on fire. so yeah, but I was hoping they're going to run around here with their heads on fire, because we're not that much under pressure, but apparently they couldn't make it. There's always a small issue, so. Talking a little bit about our situation, it's a very typical enterprise situation. Like we have a customer, and he goes into the bank, and he says to his bank advisor, "I'd like to get a new mortgage. The interest rate has fallen, so let's see what's possible." And then they agree on yeah, we should do that. And then the bank advisor, he has to go to like 1 million different systems, and the bank doesn't do the mortgage themselves. The mortgage partner does the actual mortgage, and so it's like one of these 2 organization things where you have to integrate 2 organizations, and like what everybody did like 15 years ago is that they would build a portal, and then the advisor would go in and they would type stuff, and it wouldn't be that bad, because really what this was a big step forward from that time, because before that there was all paper, and they would have to send it through mail, and it was a lot slower. So, but now that all seems old-fashioned, so we want to improve on that, because it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time, both like calendar time, like it takes several days, and there are breaks, and this time flies. It's just every time you have this process where you have to break up stuff, and you have to get back, and you have to check, is that part done? Did the customer sign? It takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of it's not just that you have to go into 5 different screens and type everything in. It's that you can't do it the same day. You have to type something in this week, and then you have to wait, and then you can type in some more, and you have to check is the design. And so when we approached our mortgage partner with this problem that this all takes too long, and they said, yeah, we understand, so let's just build a new portal for you, and then that will resolve everything, because that new portal is going to be so much better. It's new technology, it's Angular, it's going to use REST, and we were like, no, please don't do that. Please just build an API, and we get it. So you want to build your own portal? And we're like, no, that's not it either, because the portal is not the solution. The portal is the problem. I mean, we don't want anyone to press all these buttons. So if we look at how the process works on a very large scale, then getting a mortgage is like you have the situation here first with the customer and the advisor, where we help each other, and we find out how it's going to be, and this is where you probably need some kind of portal and some kind of stuff, because that's a user task. And you want to put you want to do a good job here, because that's where you talk to the customer, that's where you do your sales, and it so happens that actually the bank, they could do 3 times the amount of business they wanted, but they don't have the time because the second part of the mortgage process is taking so long. So it turns out after the customer leaves the bank, the clerk spends a total of like 2 hours per case, not in one stretch, but like back and forth and waiting. And so there's a big opportunity that we could save a lot of these 2 hours. And so this is the piles of paper here and all the clocks. There are no piles of paper actually, because it's already digital, everything, but it's just portal based. So looking a bit more into the process, so we want to get a portal here for the advisory part, and then for the second part of the process, which we call the production and the expedition. Production is very much used in a banking term, and you have to think of it like a shopping basket. You put stuff into the shopping basket, and then later you do the shipment. So in a banking world, what you do in production is that you sort of make ready the loans. You prepare an account that has to hold the amount, and then the expedition, you pay out the loan into that account that you've made ready. So you sort of prepare everything, then you execute it in the end once everything is signed and everything is in order. And so and then here the middle point, there's something called do it, which is the term that our business people use, because that's how they think of it. They want to get into a situation where they can just sort of prepare everything, like have everything ready, because they know how it's gonna be in the end of the process, and they don't want to wait. They just want to run this as a straight-through process. So they prepare everything, and then they press the big do it button, and then they want everything to run as a straight-through process. And so there's a lot of potential of saving like a lot of stuff, but what happens is then that you can make all this process, but of course today what we have is portals, so we're gonna need a lot of APIs, and they don't exist, or they didn't exist when this project started. So it turned out that that's a big job making all these APIs. And of course you could use robotics for some of that, and I completely agree with Jacob, who says that you could do robotics for some of it, but robotics is not going to drive the whole process. Robotics could replace an API, so one of the APIs could be a robotics API. We don't use any robotics, but we could. So the situation in API land was like this. Like we got launched as a project. Okay, so you're gonna do the mortgage process and make it super efficient, and then down at the mortgage partner, but really, like, being honest, like in our own organization as well, stuff was more like this. So, okay, you want APIs? Yeah, sure, we'll just build some for you, and they'll be ready like at the end of the year, or maybe in like next year, or soon anyways. So just wait, and then you can get started. And they were like, okay, sure. So okay, yeah, and then we expect you to, as soon as the APIs are ready, we expect you to ship 3 months after, because it's not a big deal. It's orchestrating some APIs, or how can that be? So we had a big task of getting ready, and so the challenge, in many ways, for this project was like, what do you do? Like, how do you start a project, and then that has to use some APIs, and they just don't exist yet. And I've seen that. It's not my first project having that challenge. It's a very, very common thing in enterprise and public sector. Is you have to find out how to walk on thin air. How do you work with APIs that doesn't exist yet? And the basic concept, and that's of course very easy to say, is that you can find something called programming in the large and programming in the small. So you can't start programming if statements because you don't have the API. So you can't say, okay, I'm not going to start working until I have the API that I can call. Then I'm going to start working. That's not possible. So what you do instead is that you separate the way you think into programming in the large and programming in the small. So you can think about the large stuff. You can think about the business process, how it's going to work, which parts are in the business process, and which APIs is it going to be. And from a technological viewpoint, you would have like different elements here. Like in the bottom, you might have Java statements like if sentences and for loops and stuff like that. And then you could have like an interface, which is say like a Java interface, but you don't know, like you could have like different implementations of that interface. But that could also, like an interface could also be like a REST API, but it could like point to different locations. You could have a stop. We use Java interfaces, and then of course on top of that, you would have like BPMN as a tool. And one of the key things, this is a real old idea from the 70s with programming in the large and programming in the small. And this is also like one of the things that all this low code movement comes from, is that, yeah, sure, you have all the developers, they run around down here doing the unimportant technical stuff, and then we have the business people up here doing the important stuff, working with the processes and stuff like that. And there's a lot of like examples of how that falls apart. So even though this is a good idea, what you really need to execute on this idea is that you still need a low distance technological from the Java statements into the BPMN versions. And that's why Camunda is such a great tool, because you just drop the BPMN file into the project and you can just work with it just as if it was like a JSP file or something like that. It's not Java, but it's something. And it's not, maybe it's not even similar to Java, but it's still in the same project. And when you hit run, it runs along with your code. We use Spring Boot, and it just integrates really well with that. And so modeling against non-existing APIs, yeah, you can still do that because you know the business. In the end, you know what it's going to be like, and the mortgage business is not going to change just because you switch out some portals with APIs. It's going to be the same. You're still going to have some point that the customer, they have to sign. Maybe they don't sign documents. Maybe they sign digitally, but they sign at some point, and when they've signed, we do something else, and that's not changing because the business. Because you do a process or for any reason. If something is going to change, it might be that today you have some delays in the process, and you might do stuff in parallel, and when you examine it, it turns out, oh wow, that's really against the rules, because you can't really do that, because they do it anyway, because otherwise the process would take 6 months instead of 3 days. And maybe you have like a delay that, we can't really do this. We have to like take 5 days from the advisory until we can pay out the money. And that was never a problem. But now really it's gonna be possible to like swipe and say, okay, I want this loan. And then of course you have to like be able to pay out the loan immediately, but that's not just not possible as it is right now, but maybe you could work on that, but it's not fundamental for the process. It's just stuff. So the process might get more legal or more straight, but it's not going to change a lot. So getting more into as close as technical details as we're going to get this talk is that we would interview the business and say, okay, so how's it going to be? Yeah. And they would tell us like, oh yeah, so when the customer signs the documents, we send them to public registration. Sure. Okay, we'll do that. And so, okay, so sending to public registration, what does that mean? Yeah, well, today we walk into this portal and we type in, we have it turns out we have a case, and then we have a document ID, and we'll send that to registration because that's already registered in there. And so what we do really was just simply write a Java interface inside our microservice, and this process here, which is of course a bit of a longer process, that would be inside the same microservice as well. And so what we could do without having any APIs available yet was still, we could model the whole process, and we could model each and every service in this process, and we could say this is going to be the keys we're going to need. And then when we have to sort of go down to the team who actually had to deliver the send to public registration service, we would say, okay, we know how the process is, and we know these are the keys that you're gonna get. And they would not, and because the business people we work with was like business analysts, and they really knew not just the business process, they also knew the system. So there was rarely any surprises, because it just clicked because they know. But still, as a developer, we still made sure that this process was bulletproof, and the way we did that was that we wrote a lot of unit tests. So even though this interface was just here and pointing out to thin air, we could still, okay, yeah, so you say you have a case ID, we need that to do this call. Okay, but how are you going to get that? Well, that has to be a variable on the process somewhere. And so you have to explain to me, how do I get this case ID? And it turns out, okay, yeah, oh, wow. And then maybe this team needs to send an event when they create a new case or stuff like that. So we need to get all these assumptions in order. So that's basically how we work with APIs that doesn't exist. So we still haven't gotten all the APIs, so we still haven't launched. So, but we're standing out here at the bottom of the waterfall, and we're ready to catch the APIs that come to us, because we have our assumptions checked. And then meanwhile, we've been working on this. We've been waiting. We haven't just been waiting. We haven't just been doing cold assumptions on how the business worked. That didn't actually take a lot of time. That was quite a fun and easy process. We did a lot of iterations on it, but we haven't done any for a while, because we also decided to disrupt how the company delivers software. So we have bought in a cloud platform, and now we can, like, we're at a place now where we can create a new service in like 1 hour and put it into test, and that used to take like a month or more, lots of hours, lots of ordering stuff from this system and this guy and this. So that would be like a heavy duty process before, but now we really we're ready for doing software development like 10 times faster than we used to be. Oh. So what I showed before with the interface and the business people, that only works so far, because sometimes you get like the guys, usually the guys who really know the business, they're really smart, and they'll know all kinds of details, and they will admit like, oh yeah, but then there was this customer, and he had a dog, and that was like he was and you got all kinds of stories, and so you need to have a plan on how to handle complexity, so you don't have to handle everything in this one project. And so there's the old 80-20 rule that applies to this as well, and that it just says that maybe 20% of the complexity can handle 80% of the customers. So we introduced these guys, Erik and Else, which some of the Danish guys might know if you recognize them. I drew them as well as I could. They're from a comedy show. But the thing is about it is that we're pretty sure that even though they're not boring, they have boring mortgages. Super boring. So Erik and Else, in our project, they have one home, and they have one loan, and they want another loan, and that's it. And turns out that this translates into a huge amount of percentage-wise of the customers. So even though we can just name this pair of customers and say this is how it's going to be, turns out that this is a huge percentage of the actual customers that we could do. And this is called, the technical term is called a persona that you can use you use that something for test planning and stuff like that. It's a great tool. Don't overuse it. It's great for the 20% case or the 80% case, but it's not going to be great if you invent another couple who has 2 loans, and then you invent another couple who has 2 houses and 4 loans, because then you're gonna get an explosion of combinations, and that's just not possible. But for the simple case, this is a very powerful tool, like talking wise in the project. Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit more, go all Rastafarian on you, and talk a little bit more about the 80-20 case. So like I said, somebody has been there before actually, because at some point this was all paper and it took a lot more time, and now it's portals, and somebody was cheering it, yeah, we did a great job, and now we're sort of getting rid of the portals and doing straight-through processing with the business, and that's totally normal. And so we're doing Erik and Else, and that's this big part here, but then we're gonna get to this part, and it's gonna be a little bit harder, and it's always gonna be a little bit harder. So, but from a business perspective, this is the big chunk, and the business people will sometimes say like, oh, we have to handle all cases, and you don't, really you don't. So a lot of projects ends up like with this blue dot up here in the corner. We're gonna handle that because then we can handle everything, and that's when the project's gonna fail and take a lot of time. Actually, I don't have a time. I have 5 minutes left. Wow, I have to be really fast. So it doesn't matter really. So you get just 2/3 of the talk. So one of the tools we did use for this was this we call this highways and byways, and that's just there's a do it button here in the roundabout. And that sort of decides that when the case is ready, like in the portal you do a case, and you have to decide, is this thing gonna go straight through processing with the Camunda, or is it gonna use the old systems? And this is written. Actually, right now we use DMN here. I'm not 100% sure if maybe that's too complicated for the case actually, but we'll see. So I wanted to talk a little bit about events, but I don't have the time for that, I can hear, but that doesn't really matter. But one thing I really want to emphasize is that when you have an organization like BC or like any other organizations, BC we have a lot of COBOL, but that doesn't really matter. What we have is very nice actually. Even though it's old, it's very nice, structured, it's silos, it's systems that don't call each other like a crisscross. It's not crazy architecture. It's not, even though it's old, it's not bad. I mean, and you get this in a lot of organizations, and all the microservices you all want to build, is they all got to be silos. And what's wrong with silos, like, is that they're really, really hard to get to call this way, because that's illegal. And that's why you need some way to get stuff out. Yeah. So, and that's when you use events. I mean, you need to convince the people who are building the system that they need to publish an event whenever they did something important. And so I split the world into commands and events, so you can say you have to do that, and it's usually what happens when you do an API call. But the other scenario is that some system says, I did something interesting, and that's when you publish an event. For instance, in our system, there's a special system for signing documents, and whenever a document is signed, that's very important, because then the process can continue. Right now, what they do is they just notify the advisor that somebody signed something, and then the advisor, he has to like, oh, okay, he has to make sure that all the signatures are there, and then he can manually press the button in another system. And that's just a simple thing like that, automating that, getting that system to publish an event instead of writing a notification to the advisor. That's really, really important. Yeah, and another thing is that it's really, really important that the systems, they don't do this, is that, oh, the old COBOL systems say, okay, so whenever we sign a document, we're gonna call Camunda, we're gonna tell them you can move on with the process. That's not how you do it. They have to like publish a neutral event to the world and say like, I'm done. and then you can catch up with that. And I'm also done? I'm done, yeah. So, we built this event bus. That was a really important part of our contribution to the system. So, thank you very much for listening.